Joining me now is Mark Mitchell, head of Rasmussen Polling, the lead pollster, by the way, who will be a keynote speaker at our National Worldview Weekend in October of this year in the Mid-South, right outside of Memphis. It's not, you can't get the tickets yet. The seats are limited, only 350 seats. But when we open it up, there'll be 350 seats. All the rest of you will have to be members of the vault. But Mark is going to be one of the keynote speakers, along with someone else I'll announce a little bit later. All right, joining me now is Mark Mitchell. Hey, Mark.
Hello. How's it going?
Glad to have you with us.
Yeah, so much going on. I feel like I say that every time, but
well, there is.
Even today, it's accelerating faster than I think everybody thought in wild, wild ways.
Yeah, we're going to get into some of it. I want to go right away though to Marco Rubio. Very impressed with how he responded as Secretary of State to CBS Face the Nation on Sunday. Watch this, folks. You're not going to believe it, or maybe you will. Maybe you will.
Well, he was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide. And he met with the head of a political party that has far-right views and some historic ties to extreme groups. The context of that was changing the tone of it. And you know that the censorship was specifically about the right.
No, I have to disagree with you. Free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian Nazi regime that happened to also be genocidal because they hated Jews and they hated minorities and they hated those that they had a list of people they hated, but primarily the Jews. There was no free speech in Nazi Germany. There was none. There was also no opposition in Nazi Germany. They were a sole and only party that governed that country. So that's not an accurate reflection of history.
Good for him. Now, I want to go back to the very beginning. Hey, here's what she said. Listen now.
Well, he was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide.
Okay. She's taking on J.D. Vance in Germany and says that free speech was weaponized. This woman has got to be as dumb as a box of rocks. Folks, this is what your corporate mainstream media hire. They hire dumb, stupid people like her, I believe. And if she doesn't like that and she wants to prove she's smart, she's welcome to come on my show live so she can't be edited. And everybody can see what I think they'll see there. This woman is stupid. She's probably a graduate of a public school, a public university. She's an idiot, okay? I try to be graceful, but she's an idiot. She's more than an idiot. I think she's evil, in my opinion, because she's saying that free speech caused the Holocaust. Well, sweetheart, baby girl, you're in my wheelhouse now as a historian that has studied and written extensively about the Holocaust. And maybe you ought to read a book. And I would, well, multiple books, but I would recommend this one here, Hitler's Cross by Erwin Lutzer. You know, I had to go to my library across the room here. I have a library of books I keep that are just vital. You know what, Mark? I want you to respond to this. I know you like history as well. Free speech was weaponized to take out the Jews. Really? There was no free speech. Listen to this. This is Erwin Lutzer writing in Hitler's Cross. The Hitler Youth competed with the educational system of the state, meaning the brown shirts. Private schools were abolished, and by 1938, all education was unified under the Nazi ideology, right? Does that sound like free speech to you, Mark?
No, and let me tell you, we came so close to losing it. I think it's fair to say that had Biden won, we would be in a much different situation right now. Maybe they would have shut down Twitter. Maybe there wouldn't be blowback in the UK and Europe about them cracking down on free speech. I don't think people understand how close it came. And maybe it's because they use this word fascism and a lot of people don't know what it means. But Democrats really don't care about free speech. I put a tweet out that said Democrats are the fascists, period. And we have a million polls, not least of which are COVID polls, that show that they really don't care about free speech. The second they come up with some reason that they think is good enough, they'll button your mouth, right? I mean, this one, which is better for owners of social media sites like Facebook and Twitter to regulate what's posted to make sure some people are not offended, or to allow free speech without interference? The country only says allow free speech without interference 51 to 35. This was as of 2022. So that's sad. But the reason is because of the Democrats. Now, Republicans at 72 to 20. And Democrats, it's 57% who say regulate what's posted. Only 32% say free speech. So we're not talking about like JD Vance going over in Europe and talking about reorganizing NATO and all that stuff. We're just talking about fifis, people's feelings. And that's enough for a strong majority of Democrats to say, no, like, shut people up. And we've seen so many other ones, and it's just really sick. So like that was almost the party in power, and there would have absolutely been blowback because of what has been happening online and the fact that they've completely lost their power. And I agree with you that lady's stupid. She's like already the whipping boy for this. Like she's embarrassed herself twice now, I think, right? Maybe it's been 3 times just in the last couple months. And so if she was smart, she would figure out which way the winds are blowing and try not to get herself in these kind of situations. But what is hilarious is...
as the great theologian Forrest Gump says, stupid is as stupid does, right?
Yeah, right. Well... I don't have any ridiculous, embarrassing like things like that online. So I'm pretty sure you probably don't as well.
No, I don't.
Yeah. But here we are.
By the way, let me mention this. Lutzer writes, he says this. He says, I'm reproducing part of a 30-point program drawn up by Hitler's good friend Alfred Rosenberg, who blasphemed Christ and insisted that the church replace Christianity with the paganism of the Nazi movement. Here are some of the chilling articles of this program. It's a 30-point program drawn up to the churches. Here's what you're going to do. And by the way, he dissolved all the churches and made them all unite under the Reich bishop, handpicked by Adolf Hitler. And they pretty well agreed to do this because they had been so brainwashed by this point, thinking that our spiritual duty is to God, our political duties to the state, never shall the two meet. But of their 30-point plan, the National Reich Church of Germany categorically claims the exclusive right and the exclusive power to control all churches within the borders of the Reich. It declares these to be national churches of the German Reich. So much for free speech, sweetheart, right? I mean, she's like, they weaponized free speech. Really, he took over the churches. That was number 1. Number 13.
Well, important point there, too. I'm sure your viewers are aware of the nuance, but what you often hear is that there's separation of church and state,
right?
Because people are concerned about the church inserting itself in the political process, which we've seen over the last decade. They're very unwilling to do, in my opinion, to the detriment of our society.
Of course.
But what the real problem is separation of church and state is to make sure that the state doesn't take over the church and use the quote-unquote opiate of the masses to enforce some kind of dictatorial or autocratic like ends. Like that's what it's about. And you just pointed it out very well. A lot of people aren't aware of that, and that's used as a bludgeon. That's used as a way to shame Christians into shutting up.
Mm-hmm. In fact, point 13, the National Church, this is the new Reich National Church, demands immediate cessation of the publishing and the dissemination of the Bible in Germany. Hey, Margaret Brennan, they had so much free speech being weaponized that they weren't allowed to print the Bible over there, baby girl. I mean, what a dingbat. Number 14, the National Church declares that it, and therefore to the German nation, it has been decided that the Führer's Mein Kampf is the greatest of all documents. It not only contains the greatest, but it embodies the purest and truest ethics for the present and future life of our nation. Number 18, the national churches will clear away from its altars all crucifixes, Bibles, and pictures of saints. Yeah, that's a lot of free speech there, Margaret. 19, on the altars there must be nothing but Mein Kampf to the German nation and therefore to God in most sacred book, and to the left of the altar a sword. Number 30 of the 30-point. I'm just giving you a few. On the day of the foundation, on the day of its foundation, the Christian cross must be removed from all churches, cathedrals, and chapels. It must be superseded by the only unconquerable symbol, the swastika. Hey, Margaret, they had so much free speech over there, they weren't allowed to put up the cross. They had to replace it with the swastika. That's not free speech. You clearly don't know history. I'm not shocked. You're, in my opinion, a mouthpiece for the cabal, for the mainstream corporate media. you got your job, I think, because you're a dingbat and will just basically do and put out whatever they tell you to say in your ear or on the teleprompter. You're a ding-a-ling. Your turn.
I mean, they've all been exposed as what I colloquially call prostitutes. I'm not sure who coined that.
I love that
but
one.
It's more apt than I think. It might have been a Rush quote. Maybe I heard that a long time ago, but it's more apt than I think at any point in time, because we all know that they're on the USAID dole. And I can understand their palpable desperation as the walls close in. Brandon, it's getting really frantic down there in D.C. The amount of searches showing up on Google Trends of people all of a sudden searching, all of a sudden out of nowhere in Washington, D.C., people just frantically searching terms like immunity and treason and offshore account. It's like, it's really getting bad.
And the home prices are cratering. People are throwing their houses on the market to get out of town. I hear they're searching what's called bleach bit to scrub their hard drives. They're searching for defense attorneys. Is that right?
Criminal defense lawyer, extradition, treason, the list goes on
Extradition.
and on and on.
They're looking for places to move to where they can't be brought back for trial.
Yeah, and the media, like Margaret, is using everything they can, every ridiculous trick that's been in their toolbox forever. I mean, they tried to create an issue over this constitutional crisis concept. Nobody cared. And then they tried to create a thing out of this Napoleon quote that Trump said, I think it was on Friday or Saturday. Guess what my overnight approval ratings were for Trump last night? Still 53%. So nobody cares, and it's not working, and they know it, and they're losing. Not only are they losing the political battle, this is, in my opinion, the really big news, is that they're losing the youth. This is incredible. In our numbers back in 2016, Hillary Clinton got, such a ridiculous amount of 18 to 39-year-olds. Trump, I think, was polling in the high 20s back then with us. That's just like 9 years ago, right? And now, admittedly, a lot of those people aged up into new age bracket, but we also got a whole lot of new Zoomers since then. And those people right now have the highest Trump approval by age at 56%. They have the lowest Trump strong disapprove at only 28%. And they're just as likely as everybody else to say that the country is on the right track. So it's like, these are the people that I think they were counting on. It's like what mainstream media is left with is basically a few people who watch MSNBC or read the New York Times in the morning. And that's a dying audience. Those people don't care. And that's what I think it's going to come about. They have nothing else, right? This whole idea of defending all of the fraud. And it's getting really bad. I mean, there was just a couple tweets today that absolutely blew my mind. But where I think they'll probably take this is they're probably going to take it into 65 and older people defending Social Security and Medicare. They're going to be the ones, again, running the ads of an evil-looking Republican politician tossing Granny off a cliff. I think that's where they're going, and all they have left. Like, what else are they going to use? Nothing else is working.
No. And you mentioned a couple crazy tweets. Elon Musk put out one today because they're claiming that he's going through all the data. He's like, if I wanted to harvest people's data and know what they were up to, random personal stuff, I could have done that at PayPal. Hello, he asked. Having tens of millions of people marked in Social Security as alive, he wrote, when they're definitely dead is a huge problem. Obviously, he writes. Some of these people would have been alive before America existed as a country. Think about that for a second. I mean, where is all this money going? Who is cashing these checks?
Yeah, well, we had just not that long ago, Stephen Miller just came out and confirmed that foreign fraud rings have been using fake Social Security numbers and identities to steal billions of taxpayer benefits through the IRS. Miller confirmed Doge is about to get the records, and over a 10-year normal budget window, you could be talking about savings over $1 trillion. Like, this is $1 trillion they plundered from the Treasury by clamping down on massive fraud in our tax and entitlement systems. And this one, too, this Representative Tim Burchett, I think he's Tennessee, says he thinks that there's a paper trail of money that was sent overseas that ended up back in the pockets of lawmakers in Washington, D.C., and that there soon will be a lot of retirements. Let's hope they retire to sunny Guantanamo Bay. Retirements, like, that's wild. Like, it is what we thought it was all along. It's
Everything
worse.
our gut told us is what's turning out to be true. Tim Burchett, he's the 2nd district in Tennessee here. And he was the one that said, that if you push and try to audit the Pentagon, you might not live very long, right? So Rudy Giuliani, who I've had the opportunity to interview several times, told me on this broadcast a few years ago that a lot of this money flooding into Ukraine was both Republicans and Democrats, and it was a gigantic money laundering scam for both Republicans and Democrats. So everywhere we look, USAID, wars, going to war, it appears as though that's what it's been. Do we have that video, Caleb, that I asked Logan to grab earlier today from the guy that supposedly shot and killed bin Laden? Ask Logan if we have it. He cussed a couple times when we asked him to clean it up. I want to play that real quick because you know what else is some of these high-profile retired military guys are now questioning why they ever went into the military to go fight wars overseas, and they realize that I was just fighting for someone's personal agenda. Generally, I was fighting for the agenda of a politician. Well, it's more than that. Go read Smetley Butler. What is it? Something Smetley Butler. He was a multiple star general who said all wars were fought for corporations. Smedley Butler, I think it was. Yeah. All wars are fought for corporations. So again, the American people at their gut level knew this is too much money going to Washington. There's no way that this whole system isn't maintained by corruption by both Republicans and Democrats, right?
No, 100%. I mean, we had a 1,000-ship Navy. Now we're spending, how many times more on our national defense, and stuff's falling apart. And we're getting the best in, cutting-edge technology in our fighters and stuff like that. But I think from a military readiness perspective, everybody agrees that we're in a worse-off spot. And, I came from the military, and it's like, even if you don't look at the potential fraud, the potential contracting issues, like all of the things that might be hidden, we have a lot of supply people and yeomen and like desk warmers and just a lot of people that just don't do that much. And it's like, I'll say too, I worked really hard when I was on the submarine, but I did a 3-year sea tour, and then an officer does a 2-year short tour, 3-year sea tour, 2-year short tour. And so you're only getting 60% operational, readiness out of each of the people that you have on the line. So I think you could take a massive hatchet to it. There's a ton of stuff that could be done. And don't get me started on all of the waste and abuse that comes from, okay, we checked the box and got the transsexual issue out of the military, right? But there's still a ton of people that get pregnant on deployment. There's still all kinds of issues of, lax discipline and leadership and cultural problems in the military that could be cleaned up and I think improve our readiness and cut those costs. But again, this is like one of a million things that happens here. Like we're talking about Social Security, which was always held over everybody's head as like, well, sorry, if you want to cut spending, we're going to have to take your entitlements away. And it turns out, no, it's a $1 trillion fraud ring that probably, catches literally everybody in DC and maybe like foreign gang rings. And I'm sure China's probably taking money. We've probably got money going to the cartels. And maybe we're going to go down there. We're going to send our special forces down there and actually see who's getting paid off. Like my point is that it's all on the table and it's all happening. This is like a revolution. This is literally the definition of a revolution. And just 6 months ago, we were saying, well, I don't know, something's going to change. It's either going to be a civil war or a revolution. And until we get a civil war, it's going to be a revolution because the public opinion, again, is just like, yep, carte blanche. This is what we want. Not everybody, but a lot of them.
I just looked it up. The U.S. government estimates its total revenue to be $5.49 trillion for fiscal year 2025. Per the White House's projections, income taxes are slated to contribute $2.6 trillion. Another $2.2 trillion come from payroll taxes. This includes $1.3 trillion for Social Security, $399 billion for Medicare, and $56 billion for unemployment insurance. Corporate taxes would add another $467 billion. All right, so I guess that if you add all that together, I guess you come up with $5.49 trillion. Now, paid in by the American people. But you just said they just found $1 trillion. Okay, it wouldn't take much more to find another $4 trillion, and basically then we can say we can eliminate the federal income tax because all the money that was being paid in federal income tax was just going for waste and fraud anyway. And I have to wonder if that's where Donald Trump is going with all of this, because he's talked about getting rid of the IRS and the federal income tax, as we've talked about here before. What are your thoughts?
Well,
and have you pulled that, by the way?
So the tariff issue, listen, the income tax, that's such a mind blower that who could have foreseen that it would have been on the table just a year ago? And we just haven't had a chance, to be honest with you. There hasn't been a news hook. And I'm sure the Americans would like that. They hate, I think, the tax system. The IRS always gets really poor ratings. And so I'm sure it'd be great. Now, we talk about tariffs. We talk about changing the way that our country makes its revenue. And I think that Trump has probably been using tariffs as a bit of a bargaining chip. But I also do think we will see a situation where we have increased tariffs. But we're in the vicinity of a $2 to $3 trillion deficit. I think this spending bill determines like how much of a deficit we're going to have going forward. Doge has committed by the end of 2026 to cut $1 trillion out of the deficit. The question mark that I want to see is like by then what we're going to have is an understanding of where our economy plays out, right? Mm-hmm. So we have massive attempts to bring manufacturing back to America. We'll have tariffs playing out. But what we also have is hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars tied up into people who are adding absolutely no productive value to the economy and layers of bureaucracy and regulations that are counterproductive. And so that stuff's going to get cut. And I wonder what kind of impact it's going to have on like the velocity of money, the productivity of the American worker. And what we might see is us grow our way out of the rest of the deficit. And what it comes down to, it's like, okay, if you're a person at home and your credit card debts are piling up and you spend more than you take in, you can either budget and cut spending and try and pay off bit by bit your debts, or you could go out and get a new job. And that is often the better response because maybe all of a sudden you like I think that Americans going to get a new job. Like that's what's going to happen. I hope, right? Like, I think that's the sunny path out of that, in which we have a new golden age where my kids have a future all of a sudden. And we don't know because there's so much fog of war. We're talking about like right out of a U.S. congressman's mouth that there will be many people retiring from the Capitol Hill because of kickbacks they've been getting from overseas funding.
And of course, the question is, where were they putting all that money? You know, right? Is there Swiss bank accounts, foreign bank accounts? Where has all that money been going? There's got Doge and AI ought to be able to find out where that money was going and do clawback, but also use it to prosecute these people. And by the way, if you want to start cutting, as you said, cut back the military, I did find it, just double check. General Smedley Butler, he wrote the book years ago, War is a Racket, and basically said every war was fought for corporations. You know, you go into Afghanistan, you're after their minerals, or you're over there with the CIA and you're growing, poppy fields and drugs or running drugs, whatever it is you're doing. A lot of times it is an absolute racket. So we don't need all these military bases all over the world. We don't need to be doing all this adventurism and intervention. I'm not for so-called isolationism, but again, the motto, America first. We're not even protecting our own stinking borders, which, by the way, brings up the fact that we have an article today that talks about just that. The U.S. military is training special forces in Mexico. Apparently, we're about to go to war with the cartel on our border. Well, maybe it's time we do something like that instead of being over in Ukraine fighting a border war for Ukraine with Russia that didn't even have to happen because Zelensky didn't take the deal that he was offered that now, after all these dead and injured people, he's willing to take. We should, and not to mention the billions of dollars that have been laundered. And again, according to Rudy Giuliani, when I interviewed him, it was kickbacks going to Republican and Democrats through that. But now the U.S. military is going to be training special forces in Mexico to take on the cartel that are running their drugs with the Sinaloa network pretty much in every major city in the U.S. How about we concentrate on this kind of thing and the sex trafficking and the rape and the kidnapping that's going on with drug cartels and organized crime, international gangs, MS-13, try the other group from Venezuela.
It's refreshing to see leadership. That's what this is. This is literally just leadership. We're seeing a split test, an A/B test, a before and after of what leadership means. Strong leadership that's got political willpower and is doing, literally committed to doing for the voters what was promised. And that's what's wild, is that this whole thing has to be fixed. There are no half measures here. We have to come out on the other side with an America that has the integrity of leadership to like not conduct illicit proxy wars in nations that we shouldn't be involved in, like does not be involved in the opiate trade, like doesn't steal 20 or 30% of Social Security out of hardworking taxpayer donkey like accounts. Like that's what we need. We have to get there. And it's really hard because you're working with Washington, D.C., which I think probably has like 5 people like that, maybe 10, right? Maybe as many people as Trump brought in. And if you turned the keys over to Kamala Harris or AOC or Pete Buttigieg or whoever's going to float to the top of the 2028 stack today, I think what you would see is a rapid and aggressive effort to roll everything back as fast as possible, and then kind of to cement a state where with a permanent Democrat control, which will be even hard and scarier because they've lost a lot of electoral power there, right? And I think that's where we're at. And so between now and 2026, I guess, where Congress might be up for grabs, they have to do something to prevent us from going back to a place where maybe 5,000 tons of gold gets stolen out of Fort Knox.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to deal with that tonight with Bill Jasper. You know, I don't think there hasn't been anyone in there since like 1974. I think it is. We're going to look at some of that tonight. I had a video. I've asked Logan to clean it up, and they've told me in my ear they've now got it. He showed me this video earlier today. This is the guy that supposedly took out bin Laden. And it's very interesting to watch. A lot of these guys are now questioning what it is their government sent them to do. You know, and part of this came up today because I walked through the room and where the TV was playing, and one of those very sad commercials came on raising money for disabled veterans. And it was a gentleman sitting in a wheelchair, and one of them looked like he could operate from the waist up. The other gentleman, I think he was paralyzed from the shoulders down. And I'm watching this videos with these guys, and I say it pretty much every time it comes on. I'm like, that is so heartbreaking at many, many, many different levels, but it should have never happened. These guys were sent to fight wars in places we should have never been. We should have never been in Afghanistan. We had no real national interest over there. We went to fight a war in Iraq after 9/11. We're like, let's go after, supposedly Saudi Arabia and Iran were involved, so let's go after Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Hello, what? And yet, you know, if you questioned that at the time, you were not patriotic. And if you questioned the Patriot Act, which we did back then, we were called communists because we're like, yeah, but this is government intrusion. George W. is president now. If Hillary gets these powers, what do you think is going to happen? So you shouldn't have it under anybody. And many of these guys are now waking up that they were sent out to do a job they should have never been doing, and even killed people that you would do the same thing they did if you raided their house. If some foreign military came in and kicked the door in of your house, you would reach for your gun too. And that's what this guy's saying. We kicked the door in of people's homes as a foreign military. They reached for their gun, and I shot and killed them. And I'm thinking to myself, well, of course he was reaching for his gun. What would you do if they did this to you? You would be reaching for your gun. People are really starting to question things that you were never allowed to question, because if you did, you were somehow questioning people's service to our country. No, I'm questioning common sense. We don't need to be seeing young guys coming home in wheelchairs for wars that meant nothing, because everything in Afghanistan has been erased. In fact, and Logan made a good point. He said, it's even worse than we went over there. I said, yeah, that's right, because now the terrorists have $80 billion in military hardware. So it's worse than when we went over there, and it's worse on the lives of the people that are sitting in wheelchairs. Before I play this clip, you want to comment?
Yeah, 100%. It's worse even more than that. I was there.
Were you really? What branch were you in?
I was in the Navy from 2001 on a nuclear submarine from 2001 to 2006. I love being a submariner, and the reason I got out is because my shore tour was going to be in Iraq or Afghanistan. It was a period where, you know, they were doing the surge, they didn't have enough leadership, and they were sending Navy people like out of submarines over to be leaders of bomb disposal squads and stuff like that. And it just so happened my EAOS lined up with me not having to go on that. And so I said, you know what? I was trained to math my enemy to death. And so I'm not putting my family through this, and I got out. But I can tell you from being in the military, what is really sad is that back then in 2004, 2005, I think it's fair to say that most people I talked to were actually pretty gung-ho about going overseas and fighting this enemy. And it's because the military leadership did what military leadership does, which is dehumanize our enemies. And so there was a lot of, like, you know, as you can imagine, stuff directed at the religion of the people that we were going to fight against. And what is kind of sick and sad is that now looking back, it was very clear that we should never have been there. It's all worse. Everybody knows it. And not only did we lose, you know, the military equipment in Afghanistan, and we lost thousands of people's lives, we also lost, in my opinion, the moral high ground of the U.S. military, because a lot of people looked at what we had. Like, I think the world can say that we did not make things better. And also, there's a ton of soldiers who don't trust the military. There's people who will not fight under a certain commander in chief. And now all of a sudden you see enlistment skyrocket. And I think that's a problem. It gets back to leadership, which is ubiquitously everybody, almost everybody that we entrusted to lead our institutions failed us because of lack of integrity. And
well, what you're saying is that the government was involved in propaganda. That's what you're really saying. They used propaganda to convince the soldiers you were doing the work of God and home and hearth and country. And I'm not a defender of Islam. I think Islam is an evil religion. The Quran is a horrible book. And what they say about the Christians and the Jews and all that in there is horrific. But that doesn't mean we should have been going all around the planet picking fights with them and then causing many of them now to want to go to war and jihad against us and then infiltrate our country. And what we did is, I think we actually inflamed them the same way our side was inflamed with religious fervor and a political and military call. Their side has also been inflamed under a religious jihad, die in martyrdom, kill the infidels, the Christians, the Jews.
The ones we didn't kill. Yeah,
right.
The ones we didn't kill. It's
so we've got a bigger Islamic problem now than we did before 9/11.
Well, I don't even know who I would trust to accurately assess that anymore, because our own State Department has been involved all over the world in these things. And it seems to me like Mike Benz will tell you that it's the modus operandi of the blob, which is that to use threats to democracy to justify things that weaken democracy. That's what has happened, right? It's like we are in a not very good situation because of our attempts to strengthen democracy in Ukraine to prevent threats to democracy. And now we're closer than ever, potentially up until a month ago, to World War III with Russia.
Yep.
And here all of a sudden we realize that World War III is actually against our own U.S. government, which has been subjugated by greed and a lack of integrity. And it's got to be fixed. And I don't know how you do it the whole way, but this is our challenge now. And finally, I think it's clear to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Like there is a golden age ahead of us if we thread this needle. And it's going to take
think about if you get rid of the federal income tax or just crush it down to a consumption tax, so the drug dealers and the prostitutes and all of them are paying their fair share. But if you even did that, can you imagine what you or I write in checks to the government that could be going to expand Worldview Tube, but no, I've got to send a ton of money to the government instead of expanding Worldview Tube so that it can go into the pockets of corrupt politicians or funding condoms in the Gaza or LGBTQ or this or that, or, you know, or giving money to Egypt and all these other foreign aid. I'm like, are you kidding me? I want to get into birthright citizenship, because I know you've polled on that before we let you go. But here's that video from earlier today. This is the guy, I think, that took the headshot on bin Laden. Listen to the transformation in his thinking. Watch and listen.
I fought for I'm to the point now where I don't think I fought for the country. I fought for some politician's view. I get to a point when you go through a door in Fallujah that you're not fighting for George Bush or his dad. You're fighting for the guy behind you or the woman behind you or in front of you. But now that you think about it, I mean, there are points now that there are particular guys that I think of that I killed. And I remember one dude in particular that I killed I shot his buddy. And then I came through his room. I killed him in front of his wife in a bedroom because he went for a gun. And I think about him now and it's like, all right, why did I kill that guy? Well, because he went for a gun. Okay, but why did he go for a gun? Well, because I was in his room at 2 a.m. Well, why was I in his room at 2 a.m? Well, because George Bush was pissed that Saddam Hussein allegedly wanted to kill his dad, so we invaded. So now here I am because of the political thing. And then I start to think, what was this guy funny? What if I met him in Paris over a coffee? Would we have actually liked each other and I just kill him because a politician sent us here? for weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. The only reason we were killing each other is because we were born on different parts of the world. That's it. Yeah. That's it.
Question everything, folks.
Yeah.
I'm not saying rebel, anarchy. I'm saying question, reason, logic, context. And I remember back then, after 9/11, I thought, why are we going to Iraq? That made no sense to me, and no one could answer that question. And now these guys that went over there and now have to live with their conscience are clearly now having a come to Jesus moment, and they're questioning what their government was doing and sending them there, and their fact that their conscience is heavy with the idea of who they killed. Well, of course he went for a gun. I'm in his house at 2 a.m. Comment on that?
Yeah, everything's going to be reevaluated. Every single line that we've been fed for decades has all been a lie to self-perpetuate what we're uncovering now. And this is it. This is it. This is the hinge, the point at which Americans' future changes, right?
Yep.
We're not going to continue the way we were. There's no Republican, Democrat sniping about policy points. That's not going to happen anymore. It's literally going to be the Democrats get back in power and the pendulum swings back. The Democrats reform and partner with Republicans to fix this issue because there are problems on both sides. Or Donald Trump steams ahead and there's like MAGA dynasty for the next, 4, 8, 12 years, however long it takes to fix this stuff. Like those, I think, are the main options. Either that or somebody starts something. I don't know if there are people still in the, with levers of power to do the things that we know they have planned on doing in the past, like Northwoods. There are still some of those people employed.
And for those who don't know, Northwoods, this was the plan during the Kennedy administration. The Pentagon came up with the idea of carrying out, quote, terrorist attacks in Florida, killing Americans, maybe even using biological or something, and then blaming it on Cuba to get the American people to have a stomach to invade Cuba. And the Pentagon, the brass, were willing to kill Americans. And Kennedy, and they brought this. It's declassified, folks. You can look it up online, Operation Northwoods. Kennedy's like, get out of my Oval Office. Get out. And of course, he took on the Fed. He was taking on the secret societies with his own speech, the gnomes of Zurich. He was taking on the military brass. He was taking on too many of the deep staters, and I think they killed him. And I think we're about to find out more when these documents get released. So you're right. Let me ask you about birthright citizenship, or what we would call anchor babies. I know you've been doing some polling on that before we let you go.
Yeah, this is a good one because a lot of people won't poll on this. People don't poll on things that they don't want that are popular. That's generally the theme. It's like, well, I don't want to find an answer I don't like because then I'm going to have to publish it. And we did this one in partnership with, Numbers USA help us structure these questions. The results are pretty astounding. It's one more thing that people on the TV would clutch their pearls about. Oh, no, this is a sacred part of our Constitution. Nobody wants to touch this one. And we're not out there trying to put a counter narrative out. We're just trying to discover the truth. And so we polled about birthright citizenship with 3 questions. Results are just from last week. So this is like post Donald Trump breaking people's doors down in ICE. And the first one, do you support or oppose the United States changing its current practice of granting U.S. citizenship to births and tourists and other foreign visitors? So this one, pretty popular, 51% support, only 37% oppose. And then we said, all right, well, let's make it a little bit tougher. Do you support or oppose the United States changing its current practice of granting citizenship to births to illegal immigrants who were released during Biden's term? So this is like, okay, the people are here, they've been here, and we're just going to take away their kids' citizenship. And that still gets to 43% support. And only 43% oppose, so that's split, and only 30% strongly oppose. And then do you support or oppose limiting automatic birthright citizenship to just births where at least one parent is a U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident, which makes sense. It's like, okay, you have a citizen, they're married, they have a kid, 56% support, 32% strongly, and only 35% oppose. And this is exactly the same kind of thing we've seen over and over again. This 55%, 35% pattern. That's like almost every component of the MAGA platform is higher than that. And so even things that people in the news would say are untenable, Trump's got almost a 20% support on literally almost everything. We're putting out 22nd Amendment polling over the next couple of days, and believe it or not, I don't think it gets to 55%, but there is a decent amount of support even for that. So that's
in other words,
give
President Trump a third term.
Yeah, a pretty good chunk of Americans. It's not a majority, but it's a pretty good chunk of Americans. So yeah, that's
we're just 4 weeks. We're just 4 weeks into this administration. 4 weeks ago today, he was sworn in.
Well, yeah. And the beauty of all this is it all comes back to everything we've been talking about tonight, which is authenticity and the death of credentials and elitism, right? And I think that's what people are rebelling against. I think that's what the revolution is. It's like, no, I'm not just going to believe you because I saw you on TV. I'm not just going to believe you because you got a PhD from MIT. I'm not just going to believe you because you're rich and a billionaire. I'm going to believe you because I've consumed your content. I understand you as a human being and I trust you. And you're making, I'm objectively assessing the decisions that you're making based on information that I consume. Is everybody doing that? No, but more people now than ever. And it's prevented the mainstream media from doing what they do best, which is divide everybody with stupid little talking points. The era of talking points, I think, is over. Although that was just a talking point. So I don't know.
But this is why this network is growing. You know, we're growing. Okay. This is, I started Worldview Tube in 2006 after getting into talk radio through Michael Reagan officially and professionally in 1995. And then in 2006, I started Worldview Tube. I started it under another name, but in 2007, I actually bought worldviewtube.com because I knew that this was a medium and technology and Roku and all that was growing. And I'm thankful I stuck with it because we now are taken off like a rocket ship. And I think it's because of all the things we're talking about tonight. You're not going to hear this on almost any of the other so-called conservative networks. They're not going to talk like this.
I don't even think there is a conservative anymore. I don't even know what that word means. Look at it. We were just talking about JFK, right? This is literally about right and wrong. We've gotten to right or wrong. Turns out none of this was about policy. None of this was about Republican or Democrat. It was literally just about, well, do the people that we elect to represent us try to screw us over the first chance they get? That's what it is. Or are they too stupid or weak-willed to do the right thing if presented with... I was taught as an officer that if I was given an unethical order, it was my sworn duty to disobey it. And maybe that means I got thrown in jail. Maybe that means that my career is over, but it was the right thing to do. And we don't have humans that will do that are leading us right now. We really don't. That whole concept is completely gone. And again, like we talked about before with you, it gets back to the fourth turning. After a crisis, the supply and the demand of order are very high. Right before a crisis, the demand for order is very high, but the supply is as low as it gets. And that's what we have right now, a super low supply of order and a super high demand for order. And what's going to happen is the world rights itself. People figure out how to supply order by themselves. That's what the end of the fourth turning is. It's the crisis point at which people say enough's enough and I'm going to supply my own order.
And that may be that you see the population run to certain states, like Tennessee, for instance, where I live, and where your state legislature is working on more and more and more legislation to fix these problems. And that's what we need is a return to the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. The powers the federal government has are limited and expressed, and the unlisted powers belong to the states and respective people thereof. There needs to be a return of order at the local and state level. Washington has dominated too much for too long.
We've seen, even in the last 20 years, 20 couple years, America completely change its state of mind for people to give up their hopes and dreams and change their callings. Think about all the people that volunteered after 9/11 to sign up for the military, the people that we now know were naively manipulated, right? We got to George W. Bush having almost a 90% approval rating. We got to people across the country slandering the French with freedom fries. There was a high level of alignment around goals and missions of the United States. If we're going to come out of the fourth turning, like that's where we're going to get to again. I don't know what the value set is, but America will be aligned very strongly around a new value set. And so what I hope and pray is that what we're seeing is people realigning around, Christianity would be great, but I would take integrity, like integrity to start, right? And that means things like accountability and tough decisions and telling people who aren't doing the right things, like, no, you're doing the wrong things, and actively opposing them, which I think you're seeing a lot of on Twitter. I think you're seeing those activities on Twitter. You're seeing people who are making bad calls getting brutally verbally attacked. And that's great, because those things are not what society needs. It doesn't need people using logical fallacies to undermine the restructuring and reordering that I think America's trying to do. And that's great. If the left doesn't like that, then fine, but you have to supply your own path forward. You have to supply your own rational way in which you're going to increase order. And I think the only plausible way that people understand who have a head on their shoulders that the Democrats could do that is through some type of authoritarian action, which they showed themselves willing to do in 2022. And so I think that's part of the equation about why the Democrats feel awfully irrelevant right now. It's full of harpies. It's full of geriatric people. It's full of people who are not cool. It's full of eat the rich communists. And how are those people going to come together in a coalition and plausibly sell to the American people that as a viable political party, they have a solution to solve our problems that's also different than Trump's, and that people believe they're willing and able to do? And I don't think they can do that. That's their problem now. They all of a sudden they need a product and they can't convince people they have one. They just can't.
This is going to get very interesting, very instructive. And we're looking forward to having you with us Friday night, October 3rd, Saturday, October 4th for our National Worldview Conference. We had it in Branson for years, Lake of the Ozarks for years. Now we're moving it right outside of Memphis for many reasons, but also to get our costs down instead of being at a very expensive resort, which is very expensive with all the cost and staging and all that, but also to get us near an airport. You can fly into Memphis, about 30 minutes from Memphis is Collierville, outside of Memphis. And Mark Mitchell, Gordon Chang, I'm going to announce someone a little bit later tonight. Mark Mitchell, Gordon Chang, Alex Newman. These are just a few of the speakers that'll be with us on that night. It isn't open yet. It will be 350 seats only. We'll open it up for registration very, very soon. But if you can't be here in person, you'll be able to live stream it at worldviewtube.com/vault. If you have a membership, worldviewtube.com/vault. So looking forward to having you here with us in person this fall. Mark Mitchell, lead pollster at Rasmussen. And I think you're also going to be coming on here on WorldviewTube real soon with a regular program, right?
Yeah. We put out a show. I'm actually going live in 10 minutes.
I better let you go.
Yeah. We go deep into the numbers, and we take an angle on the news that I don't think a lot of people have. So it's fun stuff. Rasmussen Reports Reality Check.
Excellent. And just Google it or put it in the search engine at Twitter, Rasmussen. Put in a search engine, Mark Mitchell, Rasmussen. You'll find it right away. Mark is a favorite and follow it. Thank you, Mark.
All right, thank you. Great to be here.
Mark Mitchell checking in tonight, lead pollster Rasmussen. I've been holding these cards because, again, I'm going to plug these and keep plugging them because the orders are coming in. Where are you going to get that kind of, again, programming you just saw? Don't you think you have family and friends that would have watched that and gone, whoa, why haven't I been watching this network all along? Because they don't know about it. They're waiting for you to tell them. And again, I was just watching the orders on my computer off to the side here, flooding in for these cards. They're free. Packs of 20, worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com. There's the store right there, worldviewstore.com. We have all kinds of things, freeze-dried food, emergency gear, all kinds of stuff. The water purifiers for under your sink to take out all the fluoride, all the pesticides, the bacteria, all the other chemicals. We have one for the shower. I have one for under the sink for drinking water. I have one, and that's what I drink. That's what Dolly drinks, what the whole fam drinks. And then I have one for the shower as well, because I don't want to have, I don't want to bathe in all those chemicals either, and shower in it. So again, check it out. Now here's where you get the free Worldview 2 business cards. They're free packs of 20. Check it all out right there at worldviewstore.com. Now look at that. Again, I plugged this all night. I'll plug it again before we go off the air. Worldview Foundation, because look, we just did a long format. What did we just do with him? 40 minutes? Did we huh? Like that? How many? 50. We just did 50 minutes. Did we stop and sell pickup trucks or bars of soap or a cruise or some kind of pharmaceutical? No. Not like the other guys. They would have interrupted poor Mark so many times he couldn't have kept his train of thought. They would have had him on for a whopping 4 minutes. Yeah, tune in tonight. We're going to talk to, really? Like, you made me stop what I was doing to tune into an interview with a guy you did for 4 minutes? You didn't discuss anything because you can hardly get into anything in 4 minutes. Because you got to take a break to sell pharmaceuticals and soap and pickup trucks. Well, we don't do that. You know, if that's what folks want to do, that's up to them. We've chosen a different format. We've chosen our sponsors, and one of them is our foundation, worldviewfoundation.com. We're your conservative Christian worldview alternative to National Public Radio, National Public Television. So if you like the fact we can get into these long format interviews without a bunch of commercials interrupting, it's because you make it possible. These long format interviews are brought to you by you. With your contributions, please consider setting up an automatic contribution at worldviewfoundation.com. You'll also find our mailing address there, worldviewfoundation.com. I'll plug it again later, but I want to mention, if you want to check out all our sponsors, just go to worldviewtube.com/sponsors. worldviewtube.com/sponsors. When you go to that page, you find all of our sponsors in one place, because people are asking, I got to find this, I want to find that, I need that, and I want to make sure I get to the right place so you guys get credit. And there it all is. One page, worldviewtube.com/sponsors, Worldview Talk, satellite phones, solar generators, cell phones that don't track and store your data. All that's there, folks. Check it out, worldviewtube.com/sponsors.